Welcome to Martian Mixed Martial Arts.
Wow. Wouldn't it be crazy if the aliens like manufactured you to be a mixed martial arts fighter? They're like, let's see if we could just turn this.
I'm sure if it would have happened, I would have been much better than this.
Much better than this. You're the fucking champion. What are you talking
Yeah,
about?
but if I would be alien manufacturer, I would be Superman.
Yeah, it's 50, aka Ferrari F50. Break it down. I got a lot of living to do before I die, and I ain't got time to waste. Let's make it.
What is up, ladies, gentlemen, boys, girls, aliens, Martians, any conscious beings tuning into the podcast? I welcome you to the 50th episode of Martian Mixed Martial Arts. Shout out to 50 Cent on the special introduction to this episode. Me and Curtis Jackson go way back. We grew up together. And to analyze and predict the UFC card going down in Prague, Czech Republic, I have with me one of my favorite guests on the program in the history of Martian Mixed Martial Arts. That man goes by Sriram. Say what's up, my man.
I'm good. I'm flattered that you called me all that and to have the 50th
MMA, the MMA knowledge community. That's what I came up with on the fly. But you know your shit. You're a writer for a few websites. You track your picks on Bet MMA Tips, and I've had you on the program a bunch of times before. Always love having you. I know that you'll know the fight card top to bottom every time. So that's what we're going to be bringing at you this week for the UFC on ESPN +3, going down in Prague, Czech Republic, headlined by Jan Blachowicz versus Thiago Santos. What are you thinking about the card, just looking at it from top to bottom at first glance, Sriram?
I mean, it's weird that they have the real main event as the second fight on the main card. But other than that, I mean, it's a relatively weak card. It always is when Jean Vellante makes the main card for some reason. And Stefan Struve is co-main event in 2019. But, it is what it is. They can't all be winners. And we have a great one next week, or the week after this one. So,
yeah, good points about the organization of the card. John Vellante on the main card is a recipe for disaster every time. We got Liz Carmouche on there, been around the game for a few dozen years. And Stefan Struve, like you mentioned, it's unfathomable that this guy is in a main event or a co-main event in 2019. I feel like they just, it's a good card. It's got good matchups. I feel like they just mixed up the matchmaking a little bit. You got Michel Pereira on a 7 or 8 fight win streak. He's the third fight on the card. Like, when the hell are you going to start giving this guy an opportunity to break into the top 10? Or, I don't even know if he's ranked right now on a 7 or 8 fight win streak. So, a little bit questionable decisions there, but we got a lot of talented fighters on the card, a few good matchups, and we're going to start breaking them down for you right now. So the first fight we got in the lightweight division, we have Damir Ismagulov taking on Joel Alvarez, who is 15-1. Ismagulov is 17-1. And looking over at the opening betting lines for this one, we have Ismagulov opening -110, Alvarez -110. I don't know if that's a line error or what, but right now we have Ismagulov -250, Alvarez +210. That's shocking. Does that make sense to you, Sriram?
I mean, not really, but I've always seen debutants kind of get overhyped just because, I know Alvarez, he has something crazy like 14 subs out of 15 victories. And Ismagulov, he looked decent against, I believe it was Gorgies on the Adelaide card. But, I mean, it's a nothing fight. I don't really care about either of them too much. So the odds, they could be anything. It could be -1,000 Alvarez, and I just wouldn't know what to say.
Yeah, you said he looked decent against Gorgies. That's right. I mean, Gorgies is a guy who doesn't really deserve to be on the roster, I'd say. And, Ismagulov went in that fight, took him down, controlled him on the ground, but just showed no intensity, no will to finish, no aggression against a guy who, like I said, doesn't deserve to be in there. You need to go in there and make a statement on your debut, proving that you can, finish fights. But he just really took it easy in that fight, got an easy decision win. And, I hope he doesn't do that here, because this Alvarez guy, doesn't have much footage on the internet. This is his debut fight, like you mentioned. He's got great submissions from what it seems. Most of his wins come by submission. He's very comfortable on his back. So Ismagulov is not going to be able to sit in his guard like he did with Gorgis, who has no ground game for this whole fight. So Ismagulov, look for him to mix things up on the feet. I think he will be the better striker in this fight. He seemed to have pretty good boxing from his fights back in M1. So I don't think he'll implement the same strategy as the Gorgis fight, but I think that he will keep this fight standing, stuff Alvarez's shots, and win this fight via decision on the feet. So the pick is going to be Ismagulov to get the decision win.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't think there will be a big, because generally regional sub artists, they don't tend to take sub artists on the main roster. If you look at guys like Tyson Pedro, for example, he was like a very prolific sub artist on the UFC and has one sub over Saparbek Safarov. So it's not common that sub artists tend to be actually good grapplers at the UFC level. So I could see Ismagulov just taking him down, sitting in his guard. Playing bottom is generally viable in mixed martial arts because of strikes. So I mean, this fight could go any way, and I wouldn't be particularly surprised because I have no expectations of either of them.
Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of guys come in here with a lot of subs on their record. Some guys, Suman Mkhitaryan, Jonathan Martinez, and recently homeboy who got starched on the Callum Potter. Three guys who had a lot of subs on their regional records, and they were expected to maybe come in there and face a guy who didn't have good takedown defense or didn't have good sub defense, and then they just really couldn't get that their sub game going. So that's a great point. The sub level at the regional level always doesn't translate. So.
I mean, especially when you have guys like Mkhitaryan who are winning fights by like baseball bat choke. It's pure meme shit. It's not gonna.
That guy, he had a very padded record. But we're going to move on to the next fight. Also in the lightweight division, we have Rustam Khabilov, who is 23-3, taking on Carlos Diego Ferreira, who is 14-2. The opening betting line for this one was Khabilov as the -125 favorite, Ferreira as the +105 dog. Now, looking over at our affiliated sportsbook, 5dimes.eu, we see Khabilov -145, Diego Ferreira +125. So a little more action coming in on Khabilov. I agree with this line movement. Despite Khabilov looking pretty underwhelming in his last fight, arguably losing that fight to Cajun Johnson, I just don't think that Ferreira's ground game is going to be good enough to deal with Khabilov in this fight. Khabilov is just a relentless wrestler who will just chase that takedown the whole 15 minutes if he doesn't get it. He's good at closing distance. His striking is not very good, but he doesn't fool around at striking range too long. He knows what he's good at, and that's wrestling, grinding fights out against the cage. And that's what he's going to try to do in this fight. He's taken on Carlos Diego Ferreira, who is, he's a good fighter. He's got, some power striking. He likes getting in brawls, but he fights reckless. He's hittable. He doesn't have good defense, and he's got a decent ground game. He can hit takedowns. He can get top position. He can keep top position. We saw that in his last fight against Kyle Nelson. He dominated that fight. He was trading a little bit on the feet. He didn't seem too comfortable on the feet, and then took the fight to the floor, got top position, and pounded his opponent out. So he's definitely got a serviceable ground game, but I just think that there's going to be levels to this one. And I think that Khabilov will get the win via decision. What do you think, Sriram?
My opinion's kind of the opposite of yours, just because I don't think Rustam Khabilov is particularly good. I think his just not a bettable quantity for me because he throws basically no volume throughout the entire fight. Against Cajun Johnson, he got the shit beaten out of him, and he won on 3 seconds of top control in between getting guard armbarred and triangled every 3 seconds. So I don't rate Khabilov particularly highly. I think he's bad, if I were to exaggerate a little bit. And I think Carlos Diego Ferreira is actually quite good. I think his grappling looked very good in the Kyle Nelson fight. He's always been very fun to watch grappling. And yeah, Ferreira got outstruck by Kyle Nelson, but also Kyle Nelson threw strikes. And I think that's more than I can expect from Rustam Khabilov over 15 minutes. I don't think Rustam Khabilov is going to be able to chase a takedown for 15 minutes because he just doesn't really show any urgency. And I don't think Khabilov is going to be able to sit in the guard of Ferreira because Ferreira's a legitimately good grappler. So, Ferreira at least has a great get-up game, and he's, hard to tap out, hard to control. So I think the play here is Ferreira at +125. But, Pavelov could just get another underwhelming decision, so it is what it is.
Yeah, I agree with all that too. I think it's definitely dog or pass. I would not trust Khabibov after how average he looked. I think he could drop off at any fight and really start declining. He is, he got 26 fights. I'm pretty sure he's up there in age. I'm gonna say around 36. No, only 32. He looks older than he. But he's on a 6-fight win streak, so the dude is he's can't be underlooked. So that's gonna be a good fight though. Next fight in the welterweight division, we have Michel Prazeres, who is 26-2, taking on Ismail Nardiev, who is 17-2. The betting line for this one opened up Prazeres as the -240 favorite, Ismaili at +205. Looking over at our affiliated sportsbook, 5dimes.eu, we see Prazeres -420, Nardiev at +335. So a lot of money coming in on Michel Prazeres. I don't really blame the public for jumping on that line. Prazeres has just looked very impressive in his win streak, 8-fight win streak, beating a really good competition. Sometimes he has close fights. Like that fight with Zach Cumming was a little closer than we expected, but sometimes he goes out there and just blows through his opponent like he did with Bartosz Fabinski in his last fight. Just rocked him with an overhand and choked him out with a guillotine. So the dude is explosive. He's hard to take down. He's got great wrestling. He's just a really well-rounded fighter. He's old, man. He's like 38 years old, but he's showing very little sign of dropping off. Besides his problems with making weight at 155. He hasn't really seen any hiccups in the past couple years in the UFC. Now that he's at 170, he seems to have that weight problem figured out, and he seems to be really be on a good streak. But his opponent Nardiev is making his UFC debut in this one. He's got a great record. He's I believe 17-2. Yeah, I mean I believe, was this the gentleman who was knocked out by that spinning back kick? No, that wasn't. That was another fighter on this card. But let's see. Nardiev's got good boxing. He's got some decent kicks. His striking defense is not bad too. He seems to play into his defense, and he knows it's an important aspect of the game that a lot of fighters neglect. But his takedown defense is not good. He is not very good off of his back. You saw that in his fight against Ismael de Jesus. He was taken down in that fight again. Jesus, man, looked like a low-level fighter, man, in that fight. He looked desperate for the takedown. He looked uncomfortable on the feet, but he was able to take Nardiev down. He was able to control him on the ground, and Nardiev looked pretty uncomfortable on the ground. So, you got to think that's where the Prazeres is going to take this fight, even though he is, a great fighter on the feet and on the ground. But I think that he will see that there's a big gap on the ground. He'll take Nardiev down and either get the submission, decision, or possibly even a TKO on the ground. So the pick is going to be Prazeres to extend that win streak to 9 wins.
Yeah, I agree most of the time on most of it. I think Nardiev, he has like some sort of weird Wonder Boy comparison. And I don't really see a ton of it, although I'm not sure that's a compliment either, because Wonder Boy has been uninspiring in the last few years. But I think Prazeres, he's a very solid welterweight. He was a very, very fat lightweight, so make weight, ever. And I think he's his last fight over Bartosz Fabinski was just one-sided. I think he guillotined him after knocking him down in like 50 seconds, crazy like that. So I think Prazeres is very good. Prazeres should be able to just take him down, choke him out, something like that. I'm not sure of the upside Prazeres has. Prazeres has a win over Mirbek Taisumov, who is excellent. But, Taisumov didn't look good in that fight. He's improved a lot since, and that's pretty much Prazeres' best win. So I think at welterweight, I'm not sure where Prazeres' ceiling is. My guess is that it's pretty low, considering how reliant he is on athleticism. But then again, he's at welterweight, and the champion's very reliant on athleticism, so...
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this fight. Every Prazeres fight is, somewhat exciting because the dude is just such a tank. So it's going to be a good one. And moving along to the next fight, another really close fight. We got in the fight in the lightweight division. We have Damir Hadzovic, who is 12-4, taking on Polo Reyes, who is 8-4, he dropped the Marco, just Polo Reyes now. And looking over at the opening betting line for this one, we have Polo Reyes as the -120 favorite, Hadzovic as +100. Two-way action coming in on this fight. The line is currently now at our affiliated sportsbook 5 dimes. We see Hadzovic -120, Polo Reyes +100. So I'll let you go first on this one, Sriram. What are you thinking about this matchup?
I think Hadzovic is pretty decent. I don't rate Polo Reyes particularly highly just because his best not his best showing, his most memorable showing was at UFC 199 against Maestro Dong Hyun Kim, where they just threw punch. It was like the UFC version of Don Fry versus Takayama, where they just threw punches over and over with zero defense. And Polo Reyes has since lost to, I believe, James Vick, and I don't think Polo Reyes is amazing, and I'm not a big fan of Hadzovic either, but I do believe he's coming off. See here.
A win over Nick Hine.
Against Hine. He lost to Patrick, I believe. And the knockout to Martian Held. So I think Hadzovic, he should have the advantage here. I think he's a solid fighter everywhere. I'm not, passionate about this fight, but, it's a good one. For an undercard, it's pretty decent. And Marco Polo Reyes doesn't do boring fights.
Yeah, this fight should be contested on the feet, I expect. I think it is a little evenly matched. We saw, I believe Hadzovic was out-grappled by Patrick in their fight when he lost there. And then we've only really, we saw Hadzovic finish one time in his career by Taisimov. Taisimov is a pretty elite level striker with a lot of power. And that was the only guy who was able to get Hadzovic out of there by TKO. But Polo Reyes hits hard, man. You saw that against Matt Frivola. He knocked out Matt Frivola in 1 minute, while we saw Matt Frivola's chin on full display against Lando Venata in his last fight. He was rocked in that fight badly. He came back, and he was able to make that fight a draw after, I think, losing some rounds 10-8 in that one. So you saw that Frivola's chin is actually a lot better than we expected, so that knockout that Polo Reyes has over him speaks volumes. But we saw him knocked out by Vic. He did not look good in that fight, man. He struggled with the range of Vic, and he was ultimately knocked out by a nasty 1-2 from Vic. And we've seen Vic decline a little bit in his past couple fights, and so maybe that win is a little bit suspect after all, or that loss, excuse me. So that win you did mention over Dong Hyun Maestro back at 199, just an epic fight, epic war. His chin, his cardio, his output was on full display in that fight. He loves to brawl, and I don't think Hadzovic is really too comfortable brawling. He likes to have a little more slow paced of a fight. Hadzovic, his takedown defense is not very good. He's not very good at getting off of his back. And, I guess his kickboxing is pretty good. He's got decent defense. He showed that in the fight against Nick Hine. And, I don't know. I guess I favor Polo Reyes in this one. I think that this fight will be contested on the feet, and I just think he's a little more of a fluent striker. I think that he has a chance at dragging Hadzovic into a brawl, and maybe testing that chin of Hadzovic like Taisimov did. But right now, looking at the betting lines for this one, I think that Damir Hadzovic by decision at +260 it has a little bit of value at it. Like I said, only one person was able to finish Hadzovic, and that was Taisimov. Polo Reyes might not be able to get the job done, and if he goes to the scorecards, I expect it to be close. But, this fight right now is actually favored to end inside the distance at -175, so we might not even see it go to the scorecards. So it should be an exciting one, and I'm going to slightly lean Polo Reyes' way.
I think most of that's fair. I think Polo Reyes' win over Frivola, it was kind of weird just because I don't generally think that people are, fight within, 1 minute. So Frivola surviving Lando shitting the bed that hard doesn't really say that much about Polo Reyes as a power striker. I think Polo Reyes against Maestro Dong Hyun Kim, it wasn't really a big attrition finish, but Kim did take a lot of punishment, obviously, because it was an all offense fight. So I'm not sure that I can favor Reyes going deep by drawing him into a brawl and just swinging a bunch of punches, because Hadzovic relatively disciplined, he can kind of keep distance. I think Polo Reyes' approach is fundamentally fragile just because most good strikers can avoid being pulled into brawls. And I think Hadzovic is good enough that you can't just walk at him and swing punches.
Yeah, I agree with that too. We're moving on to the next fight in the women's flyweight division. We have Jillian Robertson, who is 5-3, taking on Veronica Macedo, who is 5-2-1. The betting line for this one opened up Jillian Robertson as the -210 favorite, Veronica Macedo as the +180 underdog. Looking over at 5 dimes right now, we see Robertson at -155, Macedo at +135. So actually a decent amount of action coming in on Macedo. I gotta say I'm pretty surprised in that one, in that aspect. This is a pretty low level fight between these two women. I don't rate either of them too highly. Both of them, it's hard to say that they specialize in one thing. I guess Robertson's specialty would be her ground game. She likes shooting for takedowns to get in position and going for submissions. But even that, I don't think she's very good at. We saw her take down Maria Bueno Silva, I believe is the woman's name. Or no, I think it's Livia Renata Souza.
Oh, no, that was Bueno Silva, I believe.
It was? Okay, yeah. So, yeah, she took her down, was able to get top position, was winning round 1. And then ended up getting armbarred from top position with 5 seconds left in the round. It reminded me a lot of
every single women's fight.
Yeah, I was gonna say the Calderwood and Faria fight, or Faria was on top in that fight. It's supposed to be the better jiu-jitsu practitioner out of the two, and then ends up getting subbed from the bottom after winning the round. But that's how women's MMA goes sometimes. So for a girl whose submissions is her bread and butter, Robertson is not very strong of a grappler, and Macedo is got some good sub defense. She was putting some bad spots against Andrea Lee and also against Ashley Evans Smith. A couple sub attempts that looked like they could finish the fight, but Macedo was able to scramble her way out of there, especially against Lee. Man, Lee had her got her back a few times, maybe had her in an armbar that was close, and she was able to get out of all of it. So she's got some good sub defense. So it's going to be hard for Robertson to finish this fight. They both are pretty uncomfortable on the feet. Honestly, I have no idea who's going to win on the feet if the fight plays out there. Macedo is pretty undersized for 125. She used to fight at 35. She was tiny at that weight class, and she honestly still seems pretty small at 125. She was outsized by Andrea Lee, who's not really a big flyweight at all. So I slightly lean Robertson's way. I think this one gets done by decision. I think that Macedo will have decent enough sub defense to avoid Robertson's submissions in this one, and I think that Robertson will win the fight just based on top control and being the bigger, more physical woman in there. So the pick is going to be Robertson to get it done by decision, and I think that's plus 315 right now or something like that. So that plus 329. That's some good value. So the pick is going to be Robertson by decision. What do you think, Sriram?
I mean, my thoughts is just this is generally just the same 50-50 women's fight. Veronica Macedo didn't look particularly great against Andrea Lee, survived, but she also took multiple head that everyone tries head and arm throws, but you don't fall for them more than once in women's MMA. I think Jillian Robertson, I don't rate her grappling that highly either, just because Molly McCann had no idea what to do on the ground. She just had her back taken and got strangled ridiculously easily. So I kind of lean the same way you're leaning, that Macedo gets kind of overpowered and just gets crawled all over by Robertson. And in my opinion, the best play here is probably fight goes to decision. I got stung last week by the Emily Whitmire fight that didn't go to decision, where got strangled in a minute. But in general, I think fight goes to decision is a very good bet in women's MMA, especially at plus odds. So, I mean, I don't think there's a huge grapple here, and that's generally when you go for a finish bet. So, yeah, pretty much. I mean, I think the line movement on Macedo is mostly just thirst, because Macedo is, there's that thing. And, I don't think this is a particularly bettable fight.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you saying that it's again the plus money fight goes the distance. That's a good option, and you can't blame the Macedo action. I mean, I said I was surprised by the action, but I mean anybody Robertson should not be minus 210 versus anybody. So I really can't hate on people jumping in on Macedo at plus 180 because those odds are a little bit off. But I mean, I wouldn't want to bet either side in this fight. If I had to make a bet, I would be on either doesn't go to the distance or it goes to distance, so keep that in mind. But next fight, we are in the featherweight division. We got Daniel Tamer, who is 6-2. Daniel Tamer, not David Tamer, taking on Chris Fishgold, who is 17-2-1. The betting line for this one opened up. Let's see here. I'm looking for it on Best Fight Odds. I'm having trouble finding it. Here it is.
Tamer's plus 210, Fishgold's minus 250.
Yeah. So it opened Tamer. Oh, wow. Tamer opened the favorite. Wow. At minus 130, Fishgold plus 110. The line has since totally flipped. Fishgold minus 250, Tamer plus 210. And that's insane, the fact that Tamer opened favorite. Who knows if that's even a line error or what. But, you know, I favor Fishgold in this fight. I just think that he's the more well-rounded fighter. I think he's got some decent wrestling, got good boxing, overhand right is good. He's hurt a lot of people with that. His defense is not very good. You know, we saw that in the fight against your boy Calvin Kattar. He boxed his face off in that one, eventually getting the finish. And, you know, so Fishgold, his chin might not be the best. His defense is certainly not the best. And, you know, Daniel Tamer hits hard. For the first, I guess, round or two, he has good striking. He's got power. He was able to, you know, hurt his opponent, Daniel Henry, pretty badly in their fight. But it was just eventually just gassed out in that fight and was able to lose the second and third round after dominating the first round. It was a really, you know, underwhelming performance from Tamer in that one. And then he went on to fight Julio Arce, another killer, and it was, you know, outstruck in that fight. Was very tentative in that fight, was getting out-jabbed on the feet, and then was eventually taken down and submitted on the ground in that fight by Julio Arce. So anywhere this fight goes, I think I favor Fishgold. I think it will be competitive on the feet. I think that, you know, maybe if you're looking at a prop, maybe Tamer round one, because man, Fishgold, like I said, that defense is not good. That chin is not particularly good. And, you know, Tamer comes out swinging. He's got power while he's still got that gas tank behind him, so he could certainly catch Fishgold early on in this fight. But the later it goes, if it goes to the decision, I really favor Fishgold. If it goes to the mat, I really favor Fishgold. And the fact, if anybody got on Fishgold in between the, you know, plus money to minus 200 range, you know, congrats to you. But right now, minus 250, I would not trust Fishgold all the way at that price. After coming off that loss. So the pick's going to be Fishgold.
Yeah, I'm thinking Fishgold as well. I think Fishgold got dealt a really, really bad hand in his debut because Calvin Kattar, he was off the Moicano loss, but Kattar is, in my opinion, something about a 7-5 range featherweight because he's excellent. He's one of the best boxers in, I think you could argue, one of the best technical boxers in the UFC, and Fishgold had to just sort of come out and try to outbox that guy. So, I mean, it was a tough debut. It was a very big oversight in booking, considering that Fishgold was actually a pretty hyped Cage Warriors prospect. I believe he was the champion. He'd only lost once, and that was like a bad decision. So I think Fishgold should win this one. He has his signatures like the guillotine, and Daniel Tamer hasn't really shown good grappling, although Tamer's biggest weakness has generally just been being a pretty stupid front loader, in the sense that, like, his fight against Danny Henry, he hurt Henry really, really badly the first round, and he just swung for the entire round and, like, just got cardio poisoning in the second round. So, I mean, it's not any sort of measured pressure. It's pretty much nothing measured from Tamer. I feel like the line opened for Tamer at minus odds just because his name is Tamer, and he's actually the shit Tamer. But, yeah, I favor Fishgold here. I think the odds are about accurate. I think even a first round finish, it favors Fishgold because against Kattar, he came out swinging really, really hard, and he also seemed to have a decent grasp of what gave Kattar trouble in that fight, in the sense that, you know, he came out with leg kicks and Kattar couldn't really defend any, but, you know, Kattar just threw and punched his nose through the back of his head. So yeah, I favor Fishgold pretty soundly here.
Nice. Next fight in the welterweight division, we have Carlo Pedrozzoli, who is 11-2, taking on Dwight Grant, who is 8-2. The opening betting line for this one was Pedrozzoli, the -145 favorite, Dwight Grant at +125. The line is exactly the same right now, so I'm sure this line's been bouncing up and down all week, but right now it sits at the current opening price. I'll let you go first on this one, Sriram. What are you thinking about this matchup?
I mean, Carlo Pedersoli is a pretty decent fighter, but his last fight obviously wasn't a good showing because he went up against Alex Oliveira, and Oliveira is like top 5 in the division when it comes to just raw sheer power. He's like stupid and just caught a kick and just nuked Pedersoli in like 30 seconds. But I think as bad as that showing was, Dwight Grant's showing against Zach Otto was somehow worse. He just couldn't pull the trigger for 15 minutes. And I think I didn't bet on Grant because I don't generally bet on the really juiced Dana White Contender Series guys. And Dwight Grant was coming off one of the most vicious knockouts in the history of that show, where he jobber number 1 with like a right hook and a left that like he just absolutely killed him. So the odds were inflated. I didn't bet on Otto because Otto sucks, but both of them just spent the entire fight circling each other very tentatively. And that, like, I think Pedersoli, I believe he beat Brad Scott, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And, yeah, so Pedersoli is generally pretty decent. I don't trust Dwight Grant anymore, and Dwight, like, you know, there wasn't really a big reason to trust him anyway, but you could sort of trust him for, you know, punch chance, and he was a really good puncher, and then he went into the auto fight and shit the bed. So I'm thinking fight goes to decision as a -140, which says a lot. I'm thinking Pedersoli via decision. Pedersoli via decision's at +194, where Grant just, you know, can't pull the trigger again. It's probably either Pedersoli via decision or Grant inside the distance. You can kind of work a hedge around that.
Yeah, I agree with that pretty well there. Pedrozzoli is a decent fighter. That you mentioned his win over Brad Scott. That was a good performance. Just a high output, high intensity kickboxing match. You know, he showed his cardio is good, his defense is good, and it was a close fight, but he was able to win that one. And like you said, got sparked against Oliveira, but there's no shame in that loss. One of the best in the division there. But yeah, Dwight Grant, I just looking at his record, I remember that fight against Otto was just awful. It was just one of the worst fights in recent memory. And then I looked at his Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series fight, and I remember what a beast he looked like in that fight. His punches were stinging his opponent right off the bat, and then he was able to make that adjustment mid-fight, follow up that right hand with a left hook, and put his opponent to sleep with a very impressive knockout. And that wasn't the same fighter at all in that fight against Zach Otto. I mean, this guy's he's a small welterweight. He's skinny. He's 34 years old. He's making his debut very late in his career. I think Pedrozzoli is the much like going to be the he's going to be the shorter fighter, but I think he's much thicker. He's going to be the bigger, more physical, imposing guy in the octagon. He's also almost 10 years younger. Pedrozzoli's got a great ground game as well. You look at his wins on the regional circuit level, they're all submissions. Who knows? We haven't really seen his grappling too much in the UFC, but I'm sure he's got a good grappling pedigree to go behind. So, I did think that Pedrozzoli at +194 could be, some value in that one, but I think the Pedrozzoli, if he chooses to fight to get this fight to the floor, he could possibly sub his opponent Dwight Grant in this one. So, his money line at -145 is honestly looking pretty good right now. I just favor him wherever this fight goes. Maybe Dwight Grant could show up and not be so tentative like he was against Otto, and then show off his hands, show off that power that he showed in the Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series, and that would be a delightful surprise if that did happen. But I don't know, man. That first fight was a big red flag for Dwight Grant. I mean, I expect him to look better. He can't look much worse than he did in that fight. Even though, I think he might have won that fight, because Otto did nothing either. It was just a terrible performance from both men. So I'm going to lean Pedrozzoli's way in this one. I think he gets this one done. I'm going to go with submission for the pick in this one.
I think Grant not pulling the trigger in the auto fight, I really don't know what it came down to. It could have just been stage fright, and that's kind of silly. And feels like recency bias considering that Dwight Grant looked like a legitimately scary knockout artist against the Contender Series guy he faced. But it's tough to trust him after that one. And yeah, I did think he won, but that fight, it's just, I award you both no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
Yeah, I think this one's like a favorite or pass situation. I just don't think there's any value on Grant at 125. So, moving on to the main card, we got 6 main card fights going down at 2 p.m. Eastern time. What a fucking delight that's gonna be. There's been a lot of weird times in the UFC lately. I think we had maybe was there a Friday card? No, I don't. Maybe there wasn't. But they're experimenting with a lot of new times. They're going on ESPN. We had the Sunday night 9 p.m. card. Now we're getting a Saturday 2 p.m. card. So they're switching things out. I guess the prelims are going to be starting at 11 a.m. Eastern time. So got to set alarm for these fights. But that being said, getting onto the main card, we got a fight in the light heavyweight division. We have Magomed Ankalaev, who is 10-1, taking on Klidson Farias. Do you have any idea how to pronounce that gentleman's name?
I'm just gonna call him Klidson.
Klidson Farias. Yeah. Well, let's look at the opening betting line for this one. Ankalaev opened -245. Farias +175. Farias D. Abreu is his name on Best Fight Odds. Looking over at 5 dimes right now, we see Ankalaev -225, Farias at +185. So not much money coming in on Ankalaev. I don't really blame people. You really can't trust this guy with your money at that much of a favorite price. Maybe against Prochnio, who is just kind of like a zombie on the feet. He doesn't have good defense. He just kind of marches forward with his hands down, and each shot he was eventually knocked out in the first round of that fight. But against a grappler, man, I would be super hesitant to lay the chalk on Magomed Ankalaev in this one. We all know what happened in the Paul Craig fight. He was winning that fight probably 3 rounds to 0. Was on top in that fight and was I don't know, just got complacent in the last 10 seconds. Got a triangle thrown on with 5 seconds left, and couldn't hold on for 5 more seconds. Paul Craig's triangle must have been absolutely perfect, about to put him unconscious, because he tapped right away. One of the fastest taps I've ever seen to a triangle. That fight just stands out as one of the weirdest fights ever. A +500 underdog tapping an opponent out with 1 second left in the round after losing all 14 minutes. It's not like Ankalaev was 10-8ing him every round. I just watched that fight. Ankalaev definitely didn't dominate as much as everyone made it out to be. He was actually taken down in that fight, I believe twice by Paul Craig. But he just uses a lot of power, a little bit of technique, but mostly power, I think, to reverse position. Like, he'll let you take him down, and then he'll just grab an underhook and just power back up to the feet or something like that. He actually hit a few sweeps in that fight too to reverse position on Paul Craig. So I expect for Farias, he's trying to get this fight to the floor. Submissions are where all of his fights have, where he's won almost all of his fights, I think. Definitely his last 5 fights, all coming by way of submission. Against decent competition too. He's fighting over in Brave and M1 promotions, well-established promotions over in Eastern Europe. He's familiar with that landscape, familiar with the Czech scene or wherever those fights are taking place. I honestly, Farias, his subline I think is going to be something to look out for. I expect it to be right around his money line because he does not look comfortable on the feet. If this fight stays on the feet, I expect Ankalaev to butcher him on the feet, or probably getting that finish. If Farias is able to get this fight to the floor, it's going to get interesting because Ankalaev does not have good takedown defense, and if Farias can certainly capitalize on a position, if you watch one of Farias' fights, he takes an opponent down. The opponent has a reckless approach to getting back to his feet where he turns his back and just powers to his feet, and Farias takes his back and chokes him out right away. So if Ankalaev tries to do that in this fight like he did against Paul Craig, just power out of positions without much technique, he could certainly get caught. So, the line hasn't dropped yet. Farias inside the distance plus 332. That's a great line. I expect his submission line to be around plus 350. That's certainly worth a stab for Farias. But the pick is going to be Ankalaev. I think that ultimately he will just be the better fighter in this spot. I think that he has a good chance at stuffing Farias' shots and butchering him on the feet for the finish. So the pick is going to be Ankalaev, but it could get real interesting if Farias gets this fight to the floor.
I don't give Farias much of a shot, but that's mostly because I don't know a ton about Farias. I know a decent amount about Ankalaev, and he's actually impressed me a lot, even with the Paul Craig fight. I can't really give too much credence to getting triangled in the last 10 seconds of a fight, because it's, he kind of got, it's like calling Korean Zombie vulnerable to running into weird meme back elbows. It's just not going to happen again 99% of the time. So I think Ankalaev looked like a very good grappler in the Paul Craig fight. He kept top position and just beat the shit out of him for a good deal of that fight. It wasn't quite as dominant as, people made it seem like, it was like, Khabib, Michael Johnson, before Michael Johnson just threw up an armbar or something. It wasn't anything like that. But it was Ankalaev soundly winning every stage of the fight. He got taken down twice, but he reversed the position pretty soundly both times. In my opinion, it wasn't really like he's going to give up his back or anything like that. I think Ankalaev is pretty well-versed wherever it goes, and I do think Ankalaev is a very strong striker. Against Marcin Prachnio, I think Prachnio, he isn't good, but I think him getting killed by Sam Alvey has him kind of underrated, because Ankalaev actually did some slick stuff in that fight. He landed a right check hook type thing and just ducked underneath the return and kicked him on the guard, which knocked Prachnio down so hard that I think he knocked himself out on the floor. And then just, landed another left hook that bounced his head off the floor. I like Ankalaev as a prospect, and I think the booking, the original booking here was Magomed Ankalaev versus Darko Stasic. And that would have been a much more interesting fight. One of the two prospects that light heavyweight actually has. So I think this is going to be something of a breakout fight for Ankalaev, because I don't think a pure grappler can do much against Ankalaev. Like, Paul Craig is basically a pure grappler, but he's also long and weird as fuck. So I don't think that it's going to be a particularly close fight. I think the line, I was surprised to see it this narrow, actually, when Ankalaev was a massive favorite over Paul Craig, and Farias much more proven than Paul Craig. But, I guess because Paul Craig is horrible. I think Ankalaev is the pick here. Ankalaev in distance is minus 119. Not much value in this fight, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I'm surprised he's not much more of a favorite either. We saw him minus 700 and minus 500 in his first two fights, and here he is against a debutante at minus 225. So maybe people are learning to not lay that chalk on such an unreliable guy. But I think he is reliable in this spot. I think he will get it done. Good point about the finishing combo, man. That he avoided a punch, I believe it was an overhand from Prachnio, and then just countered with his own inside short hook, rocked him, and then just blasted him with that head kick. So he's got good counter punching. He's very well skilled on the feet. I assume he's a sambo guy. The one thing I will mention about him though is this motherfucker shouted out Kradyov in his last fight, whatever his name, Ramazan. What's the homeboy's name? Kradyov.
I believe it's Kadyrov.
Yeah. Ramzan Kadyrov, the murderous dictator of Chechnya, whatever, won his UFC fight and gave a shout out to this dude in the fucking octagon afterwards. It's insane. The UFC has banned sponsors from the UFC. I think it's Praetorian or something like that. It was some Brazilian company that had some immoral ethics or something like that back in the day, and they banned them from sponsoring the UFC, but then they got UFC fighters shouting out murderous dictators afterwards. That's not like they should cut the guy necessarily just for that, but maybe not give him a post-fight interview if he wins this weekend. Regardless,
I have a lot. There are too many people with bizarre political views in MMA. I know a ton of the Brazilian fighters. support Jair Bolsonaro, who's basically right wing to the extreme and legitimately crazy. So it's tough for me to say that they're great people, especially when you have people supporting Ramzan Kadyrov, who I believe one of his things was like there are no more gay people in Chechnya because if
he rounds
killed them or something.
he's like trying to genocide gay people.
It's one of the most disgusting things to see people shouting at people like that, but there's too much of it in MMA. It's bad.
Yeah, I remember I heard him say something like "Crodiol," and then I was like, did that motherfucker do what I just think he did? And then Kareem Zidane, a great reporter on MMA who reports a lot about these stories in Russia and these stories about Eastern European oligarchs and their influence on MMA. And he tweeted like, yeah, that guy did just give, the salute to Kradiov, if you were wondering. But one thing that just to point out is that guys with like Magomed in their name are like 20 or like 18-2 or 25-2 in the UFC. Zabit Magomed Sharipov, Magomed Mustavov, Magomed Biblatov. There's and then we got Magomed Ankalaev, Rashid Magomedov, there's a lot of great guys in the UFC. It's a little bit of a superstition, but still, you can't ignore it when they're 20-3. Go ahead.
I mean, it's more that Dagestan has become kind of a hotbed for MMA. I think it's a lot of it is promotions like ACB. Peter Yan is also from ACB, and he's amazing. There are a lot of great fighters coming out of promotions like ACB, M1 promotions in Russia, which
KSW, a lot of Brave.
Muhammad in Russia.
There's a lot. I mean, when I see a fighter, I would much a guy debuting in the UFC, I would much rather see him have fought in ACB or M1 or FNG or KSW, one of those Eastern European promotions, as fighting in an American regional promotion. Their talent pool is deep over there. So speaking of Peter Yan, though, let's get to the people's main event. In the bantamweight division, we got John Dodson, who is 20-10, taking on Peter Yan, who is 11-1. The opening betting line for this one was Peter Yan minus 205, John Dodson plus 175. Looking over at 5 Dimes right now, we see Peter Yan minus 270, John Dodson plus 230. This, right away, Yan got steamrolled down to like minus 350, which is where my bitch ass bet on him at minus 335. And now I'm staring at him at minus 270. So a little bit of more action coming in on Dodson. I just really trust Peter Yan in this one. I think I really cap him around minus 450. I mean, the dude has just impressed the fuck out of me in the UFC so far. He's got great boxing. He's got, not the best defense, but his chin is just insane. He makes up for his defense and chin, but it's not like he throws wind to defense, but he certainly can be hit. We saw that in the Soon fight. But like I said, he just ate those shots and kept coming forward like it was nothing. He'll spam calf kicks at you. He's got good wrestling. He's able to get on top of you and submit you if he needs to. And he's just 3-0 in the UFC so far. He's got 2 finishes, 1 decision win where his output was just insane. His cardio, his chin, everything was just on display. And he's got such great momentum. He's got such great skills, and he's fighting a guy who I think is losing momentum and is losing skills and attributes. John Dodson, a former title challenger, a guy who was at flyweight, he was knocking people dead. His boxing at flyweight was one of the best tools in that entire division. That was a lot of people thought that he could beat DJ, but that never ever materialized. I think that they fought twice, and was lost to DJ both times. But then he moved up to 135 and just never really looked the same. I think he got 1 finish over Manny Gamburian, but he's coming off of 3 split decisions in a row, I think, right? No, he got 30-27.
UD'd by Rivera.
Yeah, 30-27 by Rivera. Here's another thing. We just saw Jimmy Rivera looked very average last weekend. Against Aljamain Sterling, he looked flat. He was outstruck by Aljamain, and it could have been a combination of things. It could have been Rivera was his body wasn't up to par. It could have been Aljo really stepped up to the plate, improved his boxing. Or, it could be Jimmy Rivera is, declining. He was declined after that Marlon Moraes fight. He fought super, super safe against John Dodson and was just easily able to outbox Dodson in that fight. And then before that, Dodson, he had low output split decisions against Munoz, who, really questionable. Moraes, a closer fight. But, it's just, I think he's dropping off. I think he's, he's losing that speed. He's losing his power for sure in every fight. And I just think that this one is just so clearly in Jan's favor. I trust him at minus 270. I think he is the lock of the night. I think, like I said, I cap him minus 450, given his chances, 83%, something along that. The only chance I see John Dodson winning this fight is circling around the cage, running, being on his bike, and just winning a low output split decision where not much happened. If he's able to run away from Jan the entire fight and, land a little bit more than Jan, just slightly outland him, the judges could give it his way. We've seen it happen before, like against Munoz. But I just don't think that Jan is going to let that happen. I think he's going to close the distance. He's going to be pressuring Dodson, and he will win the decision. And that's going to be the pick.
I favor Jan as well. Jan's excellent. He's a very, very sound pressure fighter. I remember against Teruto Ishihara, he just kept his back on the fence for basically the entire fight. He got Ishihara to the fence and just didn't let him off the fence for the entire fight. But I think Dodson's a more dog than you put it. I don't favor him, but I don't think Dodson's lost physical attributes. I think it's more of a game planning thing that's kind of killed all of his efficacy. The way that Dodson has usually worked is, and you even saw this against Marlon Moraes, right? When guys can't get his timing because he's fast as shit, he can just run forward and wing left hands. Like against Marlon Moraes, it was a double left hand, and against a ton of guys, it was just walking in or sprinting in, cutting to an outside angle, and just spamming left hands at them. Against Pedro Munoz, the commentators thought his right hand was broken because all he that's what he does, right? And I think Dodson, he's kind of gone the Jackson Wink way, where he's trying to point fight and he doesn't really want to get finishes anymore. And I think the problem with Dodson is that he's really, really fast, but he's also one note. He's gotten away with being one note because he's fast, but he's faced two very, very strong counterpunchers in Rivera and Moraes in 2 of his last 3, I believe. So, they were able to key on his entries. They were able to basically just catch him on the way in every single time. And I think Rivera looked absolute shit against Aljamain Sterling, but he looked excellent against Dodson. He just stopped him every single time Dodson tried to attack. So I think it's really tough to favor Dodson here, but I think Jan can get a little reckless at times, especially when he's comfortable in a fight. I think Jan, like against Douglas Silva de Andrade, he pretty much buzzsawed de Andrade for the entire fight, but late in the fight, he got really, really wild with his shifting. Like, in the best way, there was a point where he threw a 1-2 from orthodox, weaved out to hide his shift, and then threw a 1-2 from southpaw immediately afterwards. It was beautiful. Peter Jan's just the best. But I think Jan does leave openings when you shift than if you stay in a stance. And Dodson showed that against TJ Dillashaw, right? Dillashaw shifted forward and ate a left hand. Dodson still has the power, in my opinion. He still has the speed. He just doesn't have the inclination to use either to its fullest potential. So I think the way this fight goes is Jan's going to pressure. Dodson's going to try to run away. Dodson's going to try to run in with his left hands and probably get countered a few times and just doing it. And Dodson's going to try to use his speed to get away from Jan, but Jan will just be too sound of a pressurer to let him away from the fence. And eventually Dodson's going to be forced to fight off the fence, because when a guy's forcing you to the fence, get you off the fence, the only way out is to get your way off. And Jan's just going to counterpunch him to death. I'm thinking Jan by decision, because Dodson's always been freakishly tough. But, I mean, I could see a finish if Dodson's as shot as you say. I just don't really think he is.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I think that Peter Yan could really put this fight in his favor is just that leg kick. If he could get that leg kick going early and limit Dodson's movement, then I think he could get that finish rounds 2 or 3. But if he's not really able to limit his mobility, it is going to be hard for him to accumulate that damage to get the finish. Good couple points about Dodson's movement. Yeah, he does use that double left hook, and he just looks like he's, like you said, point fighting in there. He just shows very little tenacity to win the fight. He doesn't throw. I mean, I feel like he never throws anything more than like 60 or 70%. So he could counter Jan a couple times with that left hook, but I think that's going to be good for Jan. I think that we saw in that fight against Soon is when he got hit by Soon, he would want to come back harder. He would get hit with 1 or 2 shots, and he'd come back with 3 or 4 hard shots, and that's not always the smartest way to fight. But I mean, against a guy who does not have much power in Dodson, I think that's a pretty safe game plan in this fight. So. Really looking forward to seeing Jan shine in this one, and it's going to be a good fight.
Yeah, I mean, the way I see it is I still think Dodson has real power, and Jan could run into... Like, I remember against Silva de Andrade, there was a point where he shifted forward and just slipped and fell in de Andrade's direction. It was hilarious, but it could also just get him run into a left hand if Dodson finds the inclination to sit down on the left hand at any point. I think Dodson's shown the inclination, like, to swing out of positions where he can't just get away. I don't think Dodson's a particularly great outfighter. He, again, gets away with speed. And against Pedro Munoz started to try to cut him off with like body kicks and stuff, and Dodson was able to just force him into the defensive with just these quick, sharp, like left-hand combinations and just get away while Munoz was covering up. I have no idea how that was a split, by the way. I think Dodson won fairly clearly. But it wasn't a great showing in terms of Dodson being an outfighter. It was kind of Dodson backing up whenever Pedro wanted to back him up, and then just swinging out because Pedro couldn't counterpunch him because Pedro's relatively slow for the division. So, I think that works in Peter Yan's favor because Peter Yan's a better counterpuncher than Pedro Munoz, and he's a lot faster than Pedro Munoz. And I think Peter Yan might be able to work the leg. I know for a fact that he's probably going to work the body because Peter Yan actually has very good body work. I remember against Silva de Andrade, he worked the body with the straight to the body. I remember he worked the body on the counter, which is ridiculous. I don't normally see people do that. And especially in MMA, because people are worried about like kicks and knees up the middle. But Peter Yan just doesn't give a fuck. I want to see him knock the shit out of Dodson and move up to kill the division. But I'm not sure it's as much of a sure deal as you're portraying it to be.
Nice. Next fight in the women's flyweight division, we have Liz Carmouche, who is 12-6, taking on Lucy Pudilova, who is 8-4. And the opening betting line for this one was Carmouche -110, Pudilova -110, a pick'em. And now we're looking at over on our affiliated sportsbook 5dimes.eu. We see Liz Carmouche -140, Lucy Pudilova +120. So action coming in on Carmouche. I can't blame the public for that one. This is a striker versus grappler matchup. We have Liz Carmouche, is a great grappler. She's been in the sport for, a decade, it seems like, maybe even more. Been in the UFC for a long time. Strikeforce Invicta. She's fought, the who's who of women. And she's been, her wrestling has taken her a long way. She's beaten, good fighters, good stand-up fighters like Caitlin Chukagian, and she got a win over Jessica Andrade back in the day too. So she's certainly, that was at 135 before Andrade dropped down and really got herself fully well rounded. But still, that win shows a lot. And Pudilova, man, her last fight, one of the best women's fights I've ever seen. Just a straight high intensity, high output kickboxing match where both women were landing hard shots. Their jabs were beautiful. Their Pudilova's kicks, man, they're wicked. She's a big girl. She's a big long girl for 35. Carmouche is kind of a shorter, stockier girl. And, this is going to be a really great matchup. Carmouche is going to be trying to close that distance. She's got good takedowns, good top pressure. She can threaten with a sub. I fully expect Pudilova to be the better striker. I fully expect Carmouche to be the better grappler. So it really comes down to Pudilova's takedown defense in this fight. I think that if her takedown defense is on point, she could win this fight. But so far in the UFC, she has not shown too great, takedown defense. She lost to, Lena Landsberg, and Sarah Moras was able to take her down in their fight as well. So, it's a very close matchup. I do know that Pudilova has been working with the Czech women's wrestling team for a while. People were talking about that she's been posting pictures wrestling with the Czech women's wrestling team for about a year now. So she's definitely working on her wrestling. She knows that's her weakness, and it's just tough to trust her takedown defense. If you're betting on Pudilova at plus 125, you are relying on the fact that her takedown defense has improved, and it has improved good enough to stop a great wrestler in Carmouche's takedowns, which it certainly might have. But is plus 125 good enough of a price to bet on that? I don't think so. So I would love to see Pudilova stuff the shots and make this and show her beautiful striking on the feet. Working her jab and her kicks. I think that she will, completely outstrike Carmouche on the feet. Possibly even finish Carmouche if her takedown defense is on point and she's stuffing shots. But I don't expect that to go that way. I expect Carmouche to get her down. It might not be over the second she gets her to the ground, but man, I believe Carmouche will have success. She could, I think she will win the round if she takes her down. I don't see Pudilova getting up too easily. But, Carmouche could tire out. Pudilova could stuff the shots in round 2 and 3 and make it a close decision. So this is a really, really close fight. I'm looking forward to it. This is a very good level of skill in women's UFC. So I'm looking forward to this fight.
I mean, I don't feel nearly as not confident. I don't feel as optimistic about it because I think Pudilova had a really fun fight with Irene Aldana, but it wasn't a technically strong fight in the sense that they both just kind of brawled. It was the women's MMA version of the fight we mentioned earlier of Polo Reyes versus Maestro Donghyun Kim. And this one it wasn't particularly compelling to me. Like, it was fun, but it wasn't interesting. And I think I favor Liz Carmouche here because I think it mostly just comes down to an athleticism difference. I think Carmouche is one of the more powerful women. As you mentioned, she's built, very stocky. She's thick, to put it in CK. I just realized after I said that sounded weird as shit.
With the CK.
CK, it's CK, definitely CK. But I think, Carmouche, Carmouche via smash. I don't feel strongly about this fight. I don't think it shows a particularly high level of skill. Despite Carmouche actually has a win in her 5th fight over Valentina Shevchenko, but it was a doctor stoppage. So, I mean, weird shit. But I think, I think Carmouche via smash.
Yeah, I saw some guys talking about Pudilova being the only Czech fighter on the card, and they're trying to prop her up for a title fight, or maybe they're trying to get the Carmouche the rematch. And some guy was like, dude, I don't think they're thinking about any of this. I think they just paired 2 names up. They don't care about Pudilova being Czech or Carmouche's title shot. Like, they have no idea what they're doing, which I totally agree with.
You could line up any 2 people in women's MMA, and they're like 3 fights at absolute worst from a title shot. Especially when, I don't know which weight class this is at. This is at women's fly. Yeah, that goes even more. Women's flyweight is a wasteland. Like, there are people there, but there's just no one established enough where you could say, you know what, this is the clear number 1 contender. The closest to that is Jessica Ai, and that is sad as fuck.
I agree with that one. Yeah, for sure. She's the number 1 contender. That's crazy. And getting on to the 205 matchup in the lightweight division, we have John Vellante, who is 17-10, taking on Michal Oleksiejczuk. I don't know how to say his last name at all. Olek, we'll call him Michal Olek. So we got over at the betting window, Olek opened as the minus 190 favorite, Vellante at plus 165. Right now we see Olek at minus 210, Vellante plus 175. So, right, I mean, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think that the value is going to be on Vellante in this one. There's not much value, because I think that Olek should be the favorite, just not quite minus 210. I mean, Vellante has that ability that Sam Alvey ability to lure you into a low output, boxing match. Just really not throwing any, his cardio is bad, his output is bad. He's got a decent chin, I guess, but Vellante does not do much right in the UFC. I mean, if this guy wasn't Chris Weidman's best friend, I don't even know that he would have been in the UFC at all. Certainly not for not this long. He's had a pretty mediocre career over the history of the UFC. So But Oleg is, he had a good fight against Khalil Roundtree. I believe that was his UFC debut in that fight. He looked decent in that fight. His cardio was that fight was a no contest apparently. I wonder why. I think
He popped.
Oh,
Popped for
okay.
steroids.
Nice. So, that's going to be something to think about in this fight. Whether if he's coming off of his special supplements and he's not as powerful as he once. I didn't think he's too powerful to start with, but shit, man. If that fight was him on steroids, I can't imagine him looking very good off steroids. So. He's got decent stand up. He tries to have defense. He tries to use head movement and then cover up punches. He just doesn't really move his feet much. So it's kind of hard for him to avoid too many shots. I mean, he was eating a lot of shots from Roundtree. Even when Roundtree was gassed out, he was eating punches. So, and his output and his cardio did not look too good. He also slowed down pretty considerably. He really just beat Roundtree in that one by being a little more active, but they were both really gassed in round 3. Oleg was able to hit a takedown, was able to win the round on top in that fight. So, he does have the ability to wrestle if he wants to, but I believe Volante's takedown defense is actually pretty good. Like I said, Volante is going to, I believe, is going to be the bigger fighter in there, so it's going to be difficult for Oleg to take him down. So, I guess Oleg I favor to win a decision on the feet, a striking battle, but Volante, like I said, certainly has that ability to win a close decision, a close split decision, something like that. So, the pick is going to be Oleg to get the win via decision.
Yeah, I'm feeling the same way. Volante, the only strong feeling I feel about him is just I don't care. It's pure unadulterated meh. And I think Oleksiejczuk, he looked good against Khalil Roundtree, but Khalil Roundtree isn't very good past, swinging big shots. He knocked out Gokhan Saki, but that's because Saki is like 1,000 years old and been in the fight game for 2,000 years. So I think, Khalil Roundtree isn't really a win to hang your hat on. And Oleksiejczuk did pop for steroids after that fight. So, Oleksiejczuk, I think his body punching looked decent against Khalil Roundtree. He put together some nice combinations and stuff. It's just beating Khalil Roundtree, it doesn't impress me. Like, it's the same reason why I'm kind of fading Johnny Walker going into the Serkinov fight. So I faded him going into the Ledet fight, even though that didn't work out. It's just, there are some fighters who, once you get past that initial burst, they're a punching bag, and that's what Khalil Roundtree was against Oleksiejczuk once he gassed out. So I think Jean Volante, aka Weidman's Artem, there might be some value there, but I don't care enough about this fight to bet on. I don't bet on these fights where you can't really trust either person to do anything well, because I think Jean Volante, he's just like, I remember against Francimar Barroso, he just walked forward, pressured, and did exactly nothing with it. And that's the sort of fighter who I don't bet on, because they don't do anything well enough where you can say, this is his win condition. Jean Volante is just going to go to a semi-close decision every single goddamn time.
Yeah, it's such a shame he's on the main card, but oh well, at least it's not at 11:30 at night where it's going to put us to sleep. It'll be at 1 p.m. But speaking of bad fights, the co-main event of the evening, we have Stefan Struve, who is 28-11, taking on Marcos Rogerio de Lima, who is 16-5-1. The betting line for this one opened up pick'em at -110 for both fighter. Right now we're seeing de Lima -140, Struve +120. So it's I just favor de Lima in this one. Stefan Struve is, as far as I know, is a shot fighter. He's looked really, really average in his last couple of fights. That fight against Arlovsky was just absolutely brutal to sit through. Low output. No, I've said this a lot of time. Low output, low intensity fight where neither guy looks like they wanna win. Neither guy looks like they're thrown with hard intention. It was just, that wasn't even his most recent fight. He actually lost the same type of fight to Marcin Tybura. I don't even really remember that fight. He was knocked out by Volkov, another tall striker. I see de Lima in his last fight. He beat a tall guy in Wojciech, He looked decent in that fight. I think he was able to hit takedowns in that fight. I imagine he'll be doing the same here. Struve, his legs are going to be a problem. He's got those super long legs. That it's going to be, and he's, a heavy guy. I'm sure it's going to be hard for him to take down. But, I just think that De Lima is, the physically the better fighter right now. Anybody who's, physically in shape, a fighter, I think could beat Stefan Struve. I think Struve is just so horrible. He hasn't gotten any better over his entire career, I think. It's, I wouldn't really bet De Lima minus 140, maybe. Fight goes the distance plus 190. How the fuck do they... Right now, Stefan Struve inside the distance is plus 152. Like, how? That's insane. He has finished two opponents, Daniel Emelianenko and Antonio Silva in 2016, but I think he has no finishing ability at all left. Who knows? I could be totally wrong in this. He could catch De Lima. De Lima is not a perfect fighter. He doesn't have great defense by any means, so he certainly could catch him. But man, I can't trust $1 on Stefan Struve. The fight goes to the decision at plus 190. I think is good value, and De Lima by decision at plus 350. I think is good value too. So, what are you thinking about this shit show, Sriram?
Yeah, I think this has bad heavyweight kickboxing fight all over it. I think Stefan Struve, people have just kind of given up on him when they should have given up on him ages ago because, people are like, Stefan Struve's going to learn to use anything, and he just acts like he's 5 feet tall every time he fights. So I think, but past all that, I think you kind of have to have like a bright line for where you fade a guy. That's kind of how I feel with Diego Sanchez against Mickey Gall. Like, yeah, I'll fade Diego Sanchez against anyone good, but I don't think Mickey Gall is that good, and that's kind of how I feel about this. Like, Stefan Struve isn't good, but Marcos Rogerio de Lima is kind of fucking horrible. He got the decision over Adam Wieczorek back at, I believe, 230, but Adam Wieczorek is also not that good. Best win is over Arjan Buller via submission. Heavyweight omoplata don't happen. So I think it's a very bizarre line to favor Marcos Rogerio de Lima over Stefan Struve because I think at this point we know that Stefan Struve is good at some things. He's not good at many things because, he's been losing all the time lately. I remember Tibura was able to just lie down on top of him. Arlovsky out-wrestled him. He got soundly outstruck by Alexander Volkov. That's not a big deal. Volkov's good. But, Struve just hasn't looked good in a very, very long time. We do know that he has, some submission. He is long, so it's kind of hard to close the distance on him when he can just leave. And if he realizes that he's like over 6 feet tall, which he should any day now, he might be able to do a little bit better than he has been, even though I don't think that he'll be able to develop a jab at any point. He won't be able to develop any sort of front kick at any point because he's just too deep into his career. He's just not that good right now. But Marcos Rogerio de Lima is, I feel about him at heavyweight, even worse than I feel about Jean Vellante, because at least I know who Jean Vellante is. Marcos Rogerio de Lima is just lumbering and bad. So I think Struve submission, once that line comes out, since Struve inside the distance is plus 152, I'm going to guess Struve via submission is somewhere like plus 250 or something like that. I think that would be worth some value, but fight goes the distance is the best bet here, because it's probably just going to go shitty heavyweight kickboxing.
Yeah, plus 190, man. That's insane to me. I bet it plus 180 about 2 hours ago, and it's already plus 190 now. So, who knows? But one thing you also got to consider is Struve's health, man. He's had a plethora of health problems. I think he had heart problems. He had fights canceled like the day before the fight or the night of the fight. Man, you always got to keep wind of that. They were just talking on the Fight Companion. Brendan Schaub, Brian Callen, Eddie Bravo, Joe Rogan, they were talking about Struve, does Struve still fight? They're like, no, he doesn't fight anymore, does he? And funny enough, he's fighting next week, those are, real fight fans who were shocked to hear that Struve is still fighting or, still had a career. So, it's tough to see guys who on three fight losing streaks still taking fights, but who knows? He could pull off the victory here, could shock us all, but, I'm expecting a low output decision. But, getting that bad taste out of our mouth between those two fights, we got ourselves hell of a main event. Honestly, this main event is fireworks. I've been huge fans of both of these guys. lately. We got Jan Blachowicz, who is 23-7, taking on Thiago Santos, who is 20-6. The opening betting line for this one was Thiago Santos -140, Jan Blachowicz +120. Right now, we see at 5 dimes a pick'em fight at -110 for both fighter. We see a pick'em across pretty much every book across the line on best fight odds. So we just got a really even fight here. These guys are just both really exciting fighters. They both are are pretty well rounded. And I'll get to breaking it down. We got Jan Blachowicz. He's got we saw him pick up that win against Nikita Krylov in his last fight. Just beautiful performance, facing a very dangerous striker in Krylov. Krylov was actually the favorite in that fight, and Blachowicz took him down. Kept that top pressure and was able to tap him out in that fight. He's done that against a few good strikers before. Devin Clark not really too good, but he had a competitive rematch with Manoa. He won that fight for unanimous decision. Was able to win that fight on the feet and on the floor in that one. Blachowicz is I think he's the more well-rounded fighter out of the two of them. I think he's very good on the feet. He's got a good jab. He's got a good chin, good defense. And he's got ability to hit takedowns. He's got ability to keep top control and to nail submissions. While Santos, he has a decent ground game, but he's really looking to stand and bang. He's one of the most exciting guys on the roster. I mean, that's why he's one of my favorite fighters, is because every time he goes out there, he's going to fight like a fucking wild man. He's going to throw 110% power. And, in a sport where some guys, their strategy is to throw, 70% all fight to win the fight via decision, it's nice to know that there are some guys out there who are throwing 100% from bell to bell. It might cost him the fight sometimes. He might gas out. But most of the time he's going to produce an electric fight, and it's going to end in a knockout for him a lot of the time. He's as we saw in that fight against Jimmy Manoa, man, one of the most exciting fights you could ask for. Just 6 minutes of fucking bombs. Joe Rogan just said it. These guys are throwing full power into every shot, and you could tell. But Santos was, robbled in that fight. He was put in some bad spots, but was able to overcome that and eventually get the finish himself. But, that fight was good. But the fight you got to look at, I think, is the fight against Eric Anders for Thiago Santos. Despite me, loving this guy a lot, man, that Anders fight was worrisome. He was taken to Anders took that fight on short notice. He moved up a weight class. 20 pounds. So you had a true middleweight taking on a guy, a true light heavyweight on short notice, and Anders, put him in some bad spots. He was able to take him down a few times. He was able to take his back, and that is super worrisome. Anders was able to take Santos's back in the 3rd round. Anders was gassed by the 2nd, and he was still able to go out there, take him down, and take his back in the 3rd. So If Anders is able to do that, I certainly think that Blachowicz will be able to do that. It's just a matter if Santos is able to end this fight on the feet before Blachowicz gets a hold of him on the ground, because Santos is he's got decent defense on the ground, but I think he really relies on power. He relies on I think I was saying this about Ankalaev earlier. He sometimes he'll be put in a bad spot on the ground, but he'll just use power to get out of there. He does have some technique, like he will go for like a judo throw or a jiu-jitsu sweep from time to time, but a lot of the times he'll just power out of positions on the ground. But I don't think he'll be able to do that against Blachowicz. I think if he does that against Jan, there's a good chance he gets submitted. So, if this fight stays on the feet, I favor Santos. I favor, turning it into a power fight where, he could test that chin of Blachowicz. But if this fight ends up on the floor, I favor Blachowicz. I favor him, winning rounds, possibly getting a submission in the maybe 3rd, 4th, or 5th round via submission. So, man, it's just going to be a really good fight. Both of these guys are in their prime right now. I honestly think this is a number 1 contender fight at light heavyweight. I think both of these guys deserve a title shot more than Anthony Smith right now. So it's a shame that they're not in that same position. But this I think will determine the next clear contender at 205, and I just can't wait for this fight. So, what are you thinking about this matchup, Sriram?
I don't think Jan Blachowicz is a particularly committed wrestler. I believe in the Krylov fight, Krylov took him down first, and then Blachowicz swept, and then just realized that Krylov was absolute dog shit from the bottom. So I think this fight takes place on the feet. and I do think Blachowicz beats Santos on the feet. I think Santos gets a bit of a he's pretty good on the feet. He's not technically the best though. He can mix up the target of his kicks to set up head kicks with body kicks like he did with Bossy. He can deal damage to the legs like he did with Branch before Branch set him on fire. But you have he's a very limited fighter. He's not a good boxer, and I think Jan Blachowicz's approach only fails when A, you can take him down, or B, you can counterpunch him. And there aren't too many good counterpunchers at light heavyweight. Thiago Santos is definitely not one of them. Jan Blachowicz's approach on the feet is kind of like he's offensively most potent when he's just running forward with blitzes. And that actually gave Gustafsson some trouble because Gustafsson, he couldn't, really do anything off the back foot because he never can. And he couldn't counterpunch Blachowicz coming in, so Blachowicz just ran face first into him over and over and just punched him up. But I think Santos kind of gets trouble the same way, and Blachowicz has actually improved since because now he actually has a jab. He can work on the counter. I mean, Blachowicz's jab isn't particularly versatile, but I think it's good enough to needle Santos to, kind of attack without committing too much. Attack from a shorter from the kicks, but a longer range than Santos swinging wildly with his hands. I think Blachowicz can get into the pocket, outbox Santos, and maybe get a late TKO. I don't think it goes to the ground because Blachowicz doesn't generally do that. It's a fun fight. I think Thiago Santos is kind of sad how how his career has gone since the Smith fight. I mean, it's not like sad, but he beat a guy. The guy goes up to light heavyweight, gets 2 really easy fights, gets the shit kicked out of him by Volkan Ozdemir, and gets a fight against John Jones. Dos Santos gets destroyed by David Branch, gets better wins, in my opinion. I mean, I don't think current Ozdemir is a better win than current Manoa, because that win was Ozdemir's win over Manoa was just shit. But yeah, I think beating Manoa the way Santos beat him, as messy as it was, is more impressive than getting beaten up by Ozdemir until he gassed. But now he has to face a tougher guy than Santos has ever faced at light heavyweight to get a title shot that Smith has gotten with relative ease. So, I mean, I'd like to see Santos win this because he's big and violent, and that's pretty much the only way that I think anyone at light heavyweight, besides Reyes, has a chance at beating John Jones. But I think Jan Blachowicz has the advantage when it comes to being a slick striker, when it comes to being he's not that slick, but Santos is just thoroughly raw. I think Blachowicz has the advantage in technique, as much as that means.
Yeah, Thiago Santos, I think he did, despite me saying that he got taken out in that Anders fight, he did fight a little differently in that fight. He knew it was 5 rounds. He knew he had to conserve his gas tank, and he definitely fought a little more conservative. But when he went to fight Jimmy Manoa, man, he went balls to the wall. And, those fight, he trained for that fight. It was late September when he fought Anders. He must have known that his cardio was, he probably just kept training right after that Anders fight. He didn't take too much damage in that fight. And he probably just was so confident in his cardio in that Manoa fight that he knew he was able to throw heat for 15 minutes straight. So, I think he is best when he's throwing that sheer power, but he might not be able to do that in this fight because it's 5 rounds. But it really just depends on how he comes out to fight. If he fights smart and tries to win a fight via decision, I do favor Blachowicz. I think Blachowicz will out jab him and be the more technical fighter. But if Santos wants to make this fight a brawl like he typically does and just goes balls to the wall from the jump, man, I like his chances at testing that chin and getting the finish early. But like you said, the longer it goes, I favor Blachowicz more, possibly getting a late finish or winning the decision on the card. So Blachowicz's decision, man, is like plus 488 or something like that. Not bad, man. That is the card from Prague going down this Saturday afternoon at 2 p.m. The main card starts at 2 p.m. The prelims start at, I think, 11 a.m. So you can catch that card this Saturday. And just to end the podcast, we are going to, as always, recap the fights from last week. We're just going to breeze through these fights, just mention them, summarize and what happened in them real quick. So we are rewinding to Phoenix, Arizona this past Sunday night. On the UFC's debut on ESPN. First fight, Emily Whitmire takes down Alexander Albu. Alexander Albu has no jiu-jitsu, no anything, and just tries to stand up recklessly and gets submitted. A pretty hilarious effort from Albu in that one, and I guess a decent win from Whitmire, but
Yeah, I have no take here.
yeah, it was
I bet on fight goes the distance. It didn't. It's a shame.
I bet on Albu right before, dude. I felt like such a fucking idiot. But I redeemed myself in the next fight. I bet I think 2 or 3 units on Luke Sanders. He came out. Henan Brow came out there winning the first round. I was surprised Brow didn't finish Sanders. He landed, it seemed like, 10 hard body shots in the first round, and Sanders, adjusted, listened to his corner, came out there, started landing punches, and then finished Brow with one of the most brutal knockouts I've ever seen. Honest, it was just sad to see that knockout, man.
Yeah, I mean, it was. Barao did a good job in the first round. I think he got a 10-8 that round because Sanders did nothing. He got staggered by a right hand. He got his body ripped apart. So it was kind of obvious that Barao was going to gas out at some point, and then Sanders just came out and beat him. So it's really sad to see how Barao fell. He used to be very, very good. It's just kind of a Roy Jones type of fall where his athleticism couldn't carry him anymore.
Yeah, and please don't give that guy any more fights, please.
That BJ Penn stuff.
Yes, or match them against one another at 145. There you go. So one of them has to get a win. Next fight, a very competitive fight. It's Nick Lentz versus Scott Holtzman. What was I going to say? We were discussing this fight as it was happening live, discussing the scoring of the rounds. Personally, I thought Scott Holtzman won rounds 2 and 3. You thought that Lentz won round 1, 10-8, and then I think Holtzman won 2 and 3 for the draw. I thought Holtzman won 2 rounds to 1, but ultimately the judge is giving Nick Lentz rounds 1 and 3. It's just, round 3 is just a round where he was on top and he didn't do anything and won the round purely based on the fact that he was on top. I mean, he was sitting in the lap of Scott Holtzman, and Scott Holtzman was just punching him in the face with those short right hands on the ground, and I'm telling you, those couple, shovel punches or whatever they were in the clinch there were the hardest shots of the round, I think. Who knows, though? It was a competitive fight, They were both grueling. It was a grueling decision, so, I mean, I can't be too... the reason I'm upset about it is because I bet on Scott Holtzman as, like, +2 or 300 or something like that after rounds 2 and 3. I thought the fight was close, so, a little bit of upset there, but still a good fight.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to give 10-8s a little bit more generously, and Scott Holtzman did nothing the first round. So, I mean, I thought it was a draw, but I'm going to have to rewatch it to actually gain any sort of real impression. I thought Holtzman looked too good against Patrick to look this kind of mediocre against Lentz, but, performed out of the skin just to destroy my parlay at UFC 229.
I think that might be like an outlier performance for his whole career, possibly looking back at it, but who knows. Nick Lentz is, very good on the ground, and he wasn't just not as able to have I don't know. Scott Holtzman didn't have as much success at all as he did in the Patrick fight, but we got Andrea Lee running over Ashley Evans-Smith. Just a awful effort from Ashley Evans-Smith, 30-27. Lee didn't look world beater, but she won very, very comfortably. I think that she will be, minus 300 in whoever her next fight is. Hopefully they give her somebody good.
Yeah, I thought Lee looked very good. Like, for women's MMA, she looked like something approaching a world beater. Ashley Evans-Smith, though, didn't really... Ashley Evans-Smith helped that by being just absolutely glacially slow and just plodding towards Lee at every opportunity. Lee just kind of destroyed her body, boxed her up. It was easy work for Andrea Lee. I'm looking forward to her fights more than I look forward to the average women's MMA fight.
Yeah, she's very well-rounded. Next fight, we had Manny Bermudez get the submission guillotine choke on Benito Lopez. Just very impressive grappling from Bermudez in this one, despite him missing weight. This was, a lot of people thought this fight was going to be competitive. Lopez had a chance to hurt Bermudez on the feet. It was a grappler versus striker matchup, but ultimately the grappler executed the game plan, taking his opponent down and transitioning from a few submissions. I think he went like darts to guillotine or something like that, and ended up getting a really nice choke from Bermudez in there. So I'm looking forward to seeing his submission skills moving up through the levels of competition in the UFC.
Yeah, I think Manny Bermudez looked very good. It was sort of a snap down from the clinch, and then he ended up in like a weird crucifix position where he landed a no arm, well, a guillotine basically, but he switched the grip to a Darce type grip. I think Manny Bermudez is pretty promising. He's not feet, but he looked like a good wrestler against Benito Lopez, so at least he has some sort of way to make his shit work. Yeah, I don't think Benito Lopez is horrible, but he got kind of overpowered here.
Next fight we had Aljamain Sterling defeat Jimmy Rivera via decision. Just not a bell to bell beating by Sterling, but he beat Rivera pretty decisively. He looked very, very good. And I think he stumbled Rivera in this fight. Rivera gets hurt in a lot of his fights though. But Aljamain, his boxing really looked good. His kicks, are always on point. His wrestling is great. And his sub is good too. So I think he really broke into the top 5 in this fight, and great performance from Sterling.
I didn't really think Sterling looked any better than normal. I just think Rivera looked absolutely dreadful. I think Sterling put together a pretty decent performance. It wasn't really a good boxing performance, but Rivera was stacked up against the fence a few times, and Sterling just, kind of picked at him with kicks and jabs and stuff. And Sterling kind of threw Rivera's game with the early wrestling. Rivera in his corner said, "I feel off." So it was disappointing from Rivera more than it was impressive from Sterling, in my opinion. But, can get a step up in competition now, and we'll see how he does.
And in the main card, we had a featherweight great fight between Andre Fili defeating Miles Gurley by decision. I think it was like a 2-1 decision for Fili. These guys were just both, their jabs are on point. I think Fili's had the better jab. Round 1 was busting Jury up. Jury adjusted a little bit in round 2, but then Fili went on to win round 3. I think Jury actually had Fili pretty hurt at the end of round 2. Made the fight 1-1 going into the third, but Fili dug deep and got that third round in his pocket and got the unanimous decision win. So, really nice performance from Fili, man. Again, I think he really broke into the top 10 in this performance and proved that he is, a legit contender at 45, and he's improving a lot. Looking forward to his next fight as well.
Yeah, Fili looked decent. It was mostly just a jabbing match at range. Jury, it's kind of disturbing how both Jury and Rivera just showed zero urgency in both of their fights. Jury landed the spinning back fist in round 2 to hurt Fili badly, and then just didn't pour it on. He hurt Fili badly at the end of round 1 too, I believe, where Fili did like this really obvious wobble. But overall,
that's right.
Thanks to just pure volume, I don't really think he has a great amount of upside, but it was a good performance.
Yeah, I thought Rivera and Jury were great favorite prices going into both of these fights, and then both of them looked super underwhelming. So, who knows what that has to say. But next fight, crazy war between Vicente Luque and Brian Barberena. We had Barberena hurt Luque in round 1. Luque ended up going for a submission at the end of round 1, and then Barberena finished on top. Really crazy back and forth round. I think Luque might have won this. Actually, you know what? I might be wrong. I think that Luque had some pretty close sub attempts in round 1. I think. Do you remember who won which rounds? I think Luque won round 1. Barb won round 2.
I had Luque up 2, but I know people said Barberena won round 2. Luque definitely won round 1. He pretty much beat the shit out of Barberena for the entire round. Got knocked down and then almost choked out Barberena twice in 30 seconds. So I think Luque was up 2, but one of the judges had Barberena up 2, which is just straight up silly. Luque was on his way to losing the third round, and then he just, kneed the crap out of Barberena and won the fight. Luque in the rankings now. He's in at number 14. And, put him up against Neil Magny for the golden ticket to the top 10.
Yeah, I was betting on Barberena live, and, it was a little upsetting, obviously that it didn't come through. He was plus 130 after the second round. He was well on his way to winning that third round, too, like you said, and he just couldn't keep it up for the last 30 seconds. If he won that last 30 seconds, I think he would have won the fight on the scorecards. Like you said, I think one judge had him winning 2 rounds to 0 somehow, so... it was a really close fight, and ultimately Luque digging deep and getting that finish late. It was pretty impressive. So in moving on, next fight, the debut of Kron Gracie. Masterful performance from Gracie. Got a hold of Caceres, avoided most of the striking. There was a few striking exchanges. He didn't look too uncomfortable. Didn't really get hit with anything too bad either. Was able to tie Caceres up, take him down, get the back, and choke him out. Just Caceres, he looked every bit as dominant as everybody expected him to in there. I honestly thought Caceres would put up a little bit more of a fight. I thought he would scramble out of a few submissions and then get submitted after a few attempts. But man, the second Kron got a hold of him, he had his number on Caceres, eventually getting the submission. No surprise, an ADCC, gold medalist versus, an average level UFC jiu-jitsu fighter, so no surprise there. Just great performance from Gracie. It's just, now, how fast do you move this guy up? Who do you give him in his next fight is the real question.
I thought Kron Gracie looked pretty good. I remember he hurt Caceres pretty badly with a shot in the pocket, and the way he got the fight to the ground was actually pretty interesting too. He had sort of back body lock. He put one hook in, and then he pushed off the cage, it looked like, to drag Caceres to the ground, take his back, get the RNC. So I think Kron Gracie has some promise moving forward. He showed reasonably powerful hands, I guess, to beat Caceres in the pocket. It's just beating Caceres doesn't mean a whole lot. So give him someone else who's marginally more difficult at featherweight. Featherweight's too deep to give Gracie too much of a step up at this point. But it was a good one. It was about as impressive as it could have been.
And next fight, really underwhelming fight, just super boring. Cynthia Calvillo, Courtney Casey, decision Calvillo's way. I was just so frustrated at fucking Cynthia Calvillo. Courtney Casey's got some of the worst takedown defense and worst, ground game in the division, and Calvillo's got some of the best ground game in the division. I have no idea why Calvillo didn't take this fight to the floor. Obviously, I bet on Calvillo by submission, but it was just so frustrating. It was a low output decision. I honestly thought Courtney Casey had a chance at winning it. I think it might have been 1-1 after the first two, but I didn't even care enough to score it. It was just so boring.
Yeah, this isn't a fight that I can really say much about. Casey's bad. Calvillo's marginally better, but also not that good. Calvillo, I believe she lost to Calderwood, but then the decision went her way for some reason. It was an overall bad fight that I'm pretty sure everyone knew going in wasn't going to be a good fight, and they still put it on the main card for some reason. So,
Yeah, above Kron Gracie. I don't understand that thinking, but nevertheless. In the co-main event, we had Paul Felder, James Vick. Paul Felder getting the decision in that one. Pretty good competitive fight. I think Paul Felder ultimately did the better work throughout the fight. That's why he won the decision. But Vick was certainly hurting him from time to time. Felder's leg kicks were on point. He was really hurting Vick with that leg kick. He almost finished him in the third round with that leg kick, actually. But Felder just showed how tough he is. Vick is just, he's declining, man. It's, he's lost now, losing 2 fights in a row. He was, at one point, he was like 7-1 in the UFC or something like that. Now he's 7-3, dropping 2 fights in a row. So, impressive win from Paul Felder, though. A lot of people didn't think he'd be able to win the fight via decision, but he got it done.
Yeah, I was big on Vick in this fight. I thought Felder wasn't particularly good. Again, really have to close distance on him. But then Felder actually put a little bit of pressure on Vick and, beat him up. So I think Vick is a lot worse than I expected, especially against a guy who can low kick him. Because Vick has a good jab, but he doesn't really set anything else up with anything other than the jab, if that makes sense. Like, the jab is pretty much all he leads with in all of his effective offensive efforts. So I think Felder leg kicking him a lot kind of killed that. And Vick just had nothing to turn to and just got battered for the rest of the fight. Felder suffered from a collapsed lung in this fight and just poker faced through it for the third round. So that's impressive. I don't really know where Felder goes from here. Obviously he's ranked because Vick was number 10 at the time, but I'm not sure how I'd cap him against the guys above him in the ranking.
Yeah, it's his ceiling might be already set, but he's still certainly going to be an entertaining fighter out there every single time. So, maybe, I don't know, Iaquinta might be a step down. Felder might be a step down for Iaquinta, but that screams great matchup right now. I think that fight was actually supposed to happen before.
Yeah, it was supposed to happen like twice.
Yeah, so let's get that booked, honestly, if Quinta isn't doing anything. And in the main event, the return of Cain Velasquez stopped short by a nice uppercut from Francis Ngannou in the clinch, eventually making Cain's knees go out, and it looked like Cain suffered a knee injury at the finish there. But I think Cain was coming into this fight injured. I speculated it on Reddit. I said, I posted this video of Cain Velasquez hitting pads where he slips and his knee looks like it buckles a little bit, and I had a lot of people, 50, 70 people, something like that, telling me I was wrong, telling me I was it was just a slip and it was no big deal, and you've never slipped like that before. I actually wrote something that said, like, I've trained for years and I've never slipped like this, and all these people were like, that's laughable. That's one of the funniest things, the dumbest things I've ever seen on this subreddit. And sure enough, he goes looking for that takedown right as the fight starts. But right when he does, man, he looks awkward. He's bending over weird for his, like, he used to blast takedowns. He used to be quick, powerful, shooting in. But man, he looked awkward. He looked like he was bending over to pick up the newspaper like an old man in this driveway or something like that. And he got a hold of Ngannou's legs for a second, but man, I think the second he shot for the takedown, his knees were already buckling a little bit. He looked off balance. He looked desperate for the takedown, and then Ngannou hit him with a short uppercut that sent Cain's balance really off, and then he landed on those knees bow-legged, or however he landed, and really tore up his knees. It looked like, pretty brutal finish. I hope there's not too much damage to his knees. They've already suffered a lot of damage. But, what would you think about the finish? Did you think that, the prior, he had any prior knee injuries, or did you think that it was just straight the uppercut caused everything?
I mean, I don't really know if we can tell by the finish, because, like, Crow Cop didn't have any prior leg injuries before he got head kicked by Gonzaga and, did the Crow Cop. So I think the finish was almost certainly a result of the blow by Ngannou, and Ngannou showed shocking power, just landing, it was an uppercut, like, right next to his chest, and Velasquez just buckled immediately. Like, not because of the knee, but because he was, like, out cold. I think it was always going to be the dynamic of the fight, that Velasquez was either going to get cracked coming, or he was going to wrestle the shit out of Ngannou. And I think it was kind of the same dynamic as the Blades fight, right? And I think I called both of those correctly, just because neither Blades nor Velasquez has real systematic defense. And that's the only thing that saved Stipe Miocic from, actually getting against Ngannou in the first minute of the fight. So I think Ngannou is relatively hard to beat at heavyweight, just because you can't really expect anything conventional from him. He can just sort of swing random weird shots that shouldn't have any power and knock guys senseless. So, I think we saw enough of the matchup to say this is how the matchup could have gone, regardless of whether Velasquez, his knee was held together by tape and prayer, or whether it was healthy.
Yeah, and even, right after the fight happened, a lot of people thought it was the knee. They're like, oh, no punches even landed, it was just the knee. It was certainly the punch. I'm not saying that, the knee that I saw was, the end-all, be-all of the fight, but right away I had people replying to me on Reddit, saying, like, oh, I'm sorry for, talking all that shit. One guy was like, I forget who it was, but I owe you an apology. Sorry for downvoting you to oblivion. And then I go back and I check the other post, and people were saying I was Mystic Mac and what all. It was a very vindicated moment. But I just plugged Martian MMA. I wasn't trying to brag too much. Like I said, it's not like I pigged. It's not like that was the end all be all of the fight. The uppercut certainly had a lot to do with it. But I do believe that Cain was coming into that fight far from 100%. And it was just sad to see him go out like that. But shout out to all the people on Reddit who maybe were listening to this episode after that little moment. That was a fun moment. So Francis Ngannou, man, it's hard to see. It's hard to there's a huge blockade at heavyweight right now. You got DC, who is very selective in who he wants to fight. He could fight John Jones at heavyweight, he could fight Brock Lesnar at heavyweight, he could rematch Stipe at heavyweight, and now it seems like he could fight Ngannou at heavyweight. I'm pretty sure Ngannou deserves a title shot at heavyweight. But if DC keeps sitting on the sidelines, and waiting for that Brock fight or waiting for that JBJ fight, do you make Stipe versus Ngannou too? Do you possibly do that for maybe interim title?
I don't. I think Stipe deserves the rematch, not only because he was the longest reigning heavyweight champion of all time, but because the win that DC got over Stipe was tremendously questionable. The eye poke was vicious. It's gone pretty much forgotten just because people are like, oh yeah, Stipe eye poke DC too. But Stipe was framing off a knee while DC had his fingers in Stipe's face for the entire fight. In my opinion, that's a tainted win, and it needs to be rematched regardless of whether Stipe is Stipe, that is to say the champion that he was, or whether it was Cody Garbrandt getting eye poked by TJ Dillashaw. Like, regardless of how many defenses the guy has, that win needs to be run back, in my opinion. So I don't think Stipe needs to fight Ngannou again. He already beat Ngannou once. I think he'd do it again, but that's not really relevant. He shouldn't have to fight him again.
But will Stipe get the rematch against DC though?
Yeah, I'd pick Stipe over DC in a rematch.
But no, will he get the opportunity?
Oh no, he won't. He almost certainly won't. DC's...
Yeah. Like it's certainly not right, but the UFC doesn't really operate on what's right, especially when it comes to title shots. I think that's probably sometimes they do the right thing. When a fighter misses weight, they'll pay them, or a kid with Make a Wish or something like that. They'll do the right thing. They do things sometimes by the book, or the moral thing to do. But when it comes to title shots, man, it's like there's no criteria. There's no guidelines. There's no respect. There's no deserving anything. You're talking about with Anthony Smith, man. That's insane that he got the title shot. You want to get Jacek getting a title shot, being 1-2 in their last 3 fights. It's the super fight epidemic. Every single division wants super fights. Colby Covington getting screwed out of his interim title, Tony Ferguson getting screwed out of his interim title, Dustin Poirier having a huge win streak, just sitting on the sidelines. The UFC's title is a mess right now, and I think that Stipe should have gotten that rematch at maybe UFC 230. The fact that DC fought somebody else was kind of laughable. But I think that ship has now sailed, and you gotta start thinking about realistic possibilities of what's gonna happen to heavyweight. But it's almost that we don't know. It doesn't matter what fans want. It doesn't matter what the UFC wants. It matters what Brock Lesnar wants, and what matters what John Jones wants. Because despite Ngannou and Stipe deserving that title shot more, those Brock Lesnar and John Jones have easy access to it. If Brock Lesnar says, "Yo, Dana, I'm ready for July, book it," he's like, "Okay, Stipe Ngannou, sorry, buddies, we got Lesnar coming in. We got the guy to save the day." He's in the USADA testing pool. That's a very realistic possibility. Who knows though? Brock Lesnar is a master of foolery, of trickery. He could just be like, the guy is so smart. He could be in this USADA testing pool just to get more money from Vince McMahon. That's the way he does things. He's like, "Oh, Vince, you're gonna give me $1 million a match." He goes, "All right, how about I go over to talk to Dana White?" Dana White posts a picture with Brock, and then Vince is like, "Oh, I'll give you $2 million a match. I'll give it whatever you want, Brock. Whatever you want, Brock. Come back." And then Brock goes back to Dana and he goes, "Oh, well, Vince is giving me $2 million." And then Dana's like, "I'll give you $3 million." He's a genius. But what were you gonna say?
It's actually kind of shocking that people want to see DC Jones 3, because I think Jones has pretty much proven that he's better than DC and a stylistic nightmare for DC. I think you're mostly right that if Brock Lesnar wants DC, he's going to get DC, and DC's not going to say anything about it because he wants Brock as well. It's just, like, I can't really talk shit about that at heavyweight because there's only one real contender at this point. Ngannou's lost to Stipe, Blades and Kane have lost to Ngannou, Volkov lost to Lewis, who already lost to Cormier. Heavyweight's just really, really bad at this point, and it's understandable that they're going to screw over Stipe. It's just, it sucks for Stipe. It sucks for people who want to see the best fight the best. I think Stipe is a pretty virtual lock for heavyweight champion once DC retires. It's just DC's never going to give Stipe a chance to redeem that loss.
So despite your fandom for Stipe, do you think that Stipe should be ranked ahead of Ngannou right now, despite Ngannou picking up 230?
100%.
You think?
It's been 1 year since that fight.
But since that fight happened, Stipe has gone 0-1 and Ngannou has gone 2-1.
I'm gonna call that a no contest because
No, come on, you can't do that.
I am. That's what I'm gonna,
like I said.
that's what I'm gonna do.
Every fight has if every fight with a foul in it had a no contest, there,
I mean, there's a difference between a foul and there's a difference between a foul and DC A violating the sanctity of Miocic's eyeball, and B threatening to do the same thing basically every time Miocic tried to swing.
But why don't you think Stipe
I'm not
made
going
a
to treat
bigger?
that as a legitimate loss because I'm not going to treat that as a legitimate win for
How long did Stipe? You know how they give you the 5-minute break for the eye poke or whatever. How long did Stipe take before he got right back into the fight?
I mean, in general, if you look at, for example, the Charles Oliveira versus David Tamer fight, fighters don't tend to take, even if they're severely hurt by an eye poke, more than 2 minutes. And the reason is that they train for 5-minute rounds without a long break in the middle. It's going to fuck their cardio, especially at heavyweight. It's going to fuck, their headspace. So I don't think that's really a good metric. And you can kind of look at, I mean, even if you look at the fight, Stipe was doing very well defensively before the eye poke, and then he got tagged up after the eye poke. So I think it's really unreal. I think it's unreasonable to rank Ngannou above Stipe because Ngannou beat 2 guys without showing any sort of notable improvement. If Ngannou beat someone like, I don't know, if Ngannou, even if he beat Blades and Velasquez while showing real improvement in his skill set, I think I'd be like, yeah, okay, you can rank him above Stipe because he might beat Stipe now. But no, he's the same fighter as he was when he lost to Stipe.
Well, I mean, if he stuffed shots and won 25-minute decisions over Blades and Velasquez, and he would deserve the shot, no doubt. But I mean,
exactly.
The fact that he's just gone out there and sparked people in 30 seconds, it might for the casual viewer it's good, but for real fans who want to see improvements and actual stuff like that, that's not good. I mean, it's certainly an improvement from the Lewis fight when the dude was afraid to throw punches, but we haven't seen his wrestling at all since he was taken down and controlled. So that is. I guess
the way I see it is, regardless of how Ngannou would have beaten Velasquez or Blades, I don't know if I would have him 100% over Stipe Miocic because the win was just too recent. I mean, it's been 1 year, Ran, and in that 1 year, Ngannou hasn't made any sort of real improvement. And even if he did, he hasn't made that improvement against someone who's even remotely comparable to Stipe Miocic. He hasn't faced anyone who has real noteworthy defense. He hasn't faced anyone who has real noteworthy boxing.
Well, they're comparable. Kane and Stipe are certainly comparable.
I don't think so. Not in boxing.
No way. Come on. They're the top 3 UFC heavyweights of all time.
I'm not sure, actually.
Verdum, Kane, Stipe, probably.
Nah, so I might go Stipe, Verdum, and in pure skill, I'd probably go Overeem over Velasquez.
No way. Come on.
Velasquez beat the same 2 people over and over in the UFC in his prime, and then he lost to Verdum.
Yeah, but that wasn't his fault. I mean, it
wasn't his fault, but that doesn't mean that you have to give him credit for beating a bunch of other.
Well, he ran through Lesnar easily.
Lesnar's an amazing win. Overeem killed Lesnar too.
Yeah, but to be honest, I mean, who do you think had more steroids charged up in their system at the time, Overeem or Kane? I mean, I'm not saying Kane. I'm not saying Kane was clean, but I'm saying that fucking Reem had a little bit more assistance behind the win.
I mean, I just don't think that's relevant, to be honest. I mean, you can look at those fights and say Cain Velasquez is definitely better than Alistair Overeem, or you can say both of them kicked the absolute fuck.
Well, what about TRT Bigfoot? Cain Velasquez literally donated like a pint or a quart of blood from TRT.
Yeah, the Bigfoot win for Kane was good. The Bigfoot wins rather, and the Bigfoot loss was horrible for Overeem. But on the other hand, you also have Overeem with a far broader heavyweight resume. So I think I would give Overeem the edge over Velasquez. And if the 2 of them fought, Velasquez versus Overeem, I would definitely pick Overeem.
I don't know. Well, it depends what year.
Yeah, that's fair.
2012. I mean, it would have been a hell of a fucking matchup. It's almost a goddamn sin that we didn't get that fight.
I mean, if both of them are close to their prime, I definitely pick Overeem. Today's Overeem, who got wrestle-fucked by Blades, I'm not sure. But the Overeem who faced like Mark Hunt in 2016, I think he gives Velasquez a beating.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's certainly close, but I mean, 2013, 2012 Kane, man, I think that guy was up there with 2004 Fedor and 2015. I mean, I think the best heavyweights we've ever seen are Fedor in the mid 2000s, Kane in the early 2010s, and then Verdum probably in like maybe the mid 2010s as well when he tapped.
I put Miocic over all three of them.
I don't know. I mean, it's tough to say because honestly, I think Verdum is the better heavyweight than Stipe, even though
no way.
No, but I mean, all right. Well, I don't know. It's hard to say. It's hard to say fighters are better than the other when one's beat them. I mean, I go both way with it. It goes both way with this. I mean, I would probably say that Holloway is the better featherweight than Aldo is, but I would probably
Overall?
say, yeah. I mean, in skill, I'm not saying that. I wouldn't say he's
okay.
I wouldn't say he's had the better featherweight career. I would say he's the better
that's fair,
fighter.
Actually. That's fair.
Same thing with Verdum. I wouldn't say necessarily he's had a better. I mean, I just think his skills are better. I mean, obviously you don't have to. I mean, there's clear advantages on the ground for Verdum, but man, dude, the way Verdum beat Cain Velasquez and he knocked out Mark Hunt, and his striking is incredible especially for a jiu-jitsu guy.
I mean, I think the way I look at it is Verdum has had a great career, and I'd definitely put him all time over Velasquez. I'd put Miocic, Fedor, and Verdum over Velasquez all time. But I think Stipe Miocic is a better fighter than Fabricio Verdum, and I think he's a greater fighter than Fabricio Verdum. I think Verdum's striking is good, but for the most part, it's kind of that what's his name? It's like that Cordero thing where they just run forward throwing 1-2s. And it works because heavyweights can't really deal with it, but Stipe could. I think Stipe is a better boxer. I think he might be the better kicker, but I don't think either's a particularly good kicker. Stipe is the better wrestler by far, and Verdum's a better grappler, but he can't get there because his wrestling's not great. I don't really see an argument for saying that Verdum is the better fighter or the greater fighter, but, it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, there's it comes down to how you view, the better fighter. You can look at pound for pound two ways, and it's, who has the better overall, striking, grappling, wrestling, all that, or who will do better throughout the weight classes. There's that classic debate. I mean, I typically tend to think of who has the better skills. I mean, I think it's kind of arbitrary to think like, well, what if Jose Aldo and Cain Velasquez fought at heavyweight or something? Like, who would win? I mean, I think that's almost incomparable. Like, that's not what pound for pound. I don't know though. I
think that's exactly what pound for pound means, just in the sense that if you're going to compare fighters across weight classes, then you kind of need to say, well, what if they were all at one weight class? All of their skills were exactly the same as they are now, but their physical attributes are scaled against each other relative to how they were to their weight class. Like, it's kind of hard.
It is hard because the guys at heavyweight and guys at flyweight, like, there's two different types of fights,
Yeah, but I'd say flyweights are overall more skilled than heavyweights for the most part.
Yeah, definitely. And it's just the more movement. Like, but if Mighty Mouse fought at heavyweight, he might not have been his body type wouldn't have been at the right type to fight, with movement and all that, distance and all that.
I think that's kind of silly, because look at other sports. Heavy people can do really well, even athletically and when it comes to skills. Like, if you look at boxing, a cruiserweight, Alexander Usyk, is right now probably the best boxer in the world.
Yeah, I agree. I think
it sucks because it's heavyweight.
Yeah, I mean, great. I mean, I agree with you there. I mean, Usyk is probably the most underrated boxer in the world. I mean, his skills might be better than Lomachenko's.
I mean, the way I look at it is, heavyweight doesn't suck because it's heavyweight. Heavyweight sucks because it sucks. And right now, there have been no heavyweights. Stipe is the closest, but there have been no heavyweights that I'd say would go down to an actually deep weight class and do really, really well. Right? Like, you could take Cain Velasquez, plug him down into, lightweight, and I think he'd lose to a lot of guys. You could do the same with Daniel Cormier. You could do the same with Stipe Miocic. But I think, if you were to compare fighters across weight classes, you kind of need to say, with everything equalized, with size equalized, who is the most skilled?
Yeah, I mean, I think the same way. It's just a different way of approaching it. I don't think about how they would fight. or if they were at a certain weight class, I compare who, Jose Aldo's striking to, Anthony Pettis' striking. I mean, I guess that's a little easier to compare because they're close in weight. But I mean, I just think about who has the overall better skill, not exactly how they would match up against one another, because, skill or matchups make fights and everything,
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Yeah, well, we rambled on about the possibility of the heavyweight division for enough. We recapped the UFC Phoenix card, and we analyzed and predicted all 13 fights on the UFC's on ESPN Plus card going down this Saturday afternoon in Prague, Czech Republic. So that has been the 50th episode of Martian MMA. I want to thank my guest Sriram for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure, my man, and thank you to each and every listener who has listened to this episode and to every episode over the past 50 episodes. It's been a pleasure making every single one of these podcasts, and I look forward to the next 50 before episode 100. So, with that being said, ladies, gentlemen, boys, girls, aliens, Martians, any conscious beings tuning into the podcast, I thank you for tuning in to episode 50 of Martian Mixed Martial Arts, and I will catch you guys next week before UFC 235. Peace.